Across history, humanity has obeyed some of the most mind-bendingly stupid rules ever created. Laws and traditions so bizarre, they feel like satire disguised as culture. From fashion codes that punished the wrong color of clothing, to food restrictions that banned entire meals for reasons no one could explain, to festival rituals that forced people into outrageous behaviors, these rules were not just strange, they were real. Today, we're diving into 50 of the dumbest fashion, food, and festival rules that actually existed, and they will blow your mind. In ancient Rome, wearing Tyrian purple wasn't just fashion, it was a deadly gamble. This rare dye, extracted from thousands of crushed murex snails, was reserved strictly for emperors. Anyone else caught wearing even a sliver of it could be executed for challenging imperial divinity. Purple became a weaponized color, a visual border between power and the powerless. A simple cloak could destroy a life, showing how clothing once translated into political obedience, fear, and absolute submission to authority. For almost a millennium in imperial China, young girls were forced into the agonizing Golden Lotus rule, where feet were broken, folded, and bound until they became 3-inch deformities. Families believed tiny feet increased marriage value and symbolized purity. Festivals demanded embroidered miniature shoes, reinforcing beauty standards rooted in pain. Women lived with permanent disability, unable to run, dance, or even walk properly. Fashion wasn't expression. It was oppression wrapped in silk, proving how beauty can evolve into generational suffering. In 18th century southwestern Germany, towns enforced a bizarre rule banning anyone who smelled of onions or garlic from attending church feasts. Priests insisted strong odors disrupted divine presence, turning everyday vegetables into moral offenses. People had to wash, change clothes, and avoid traditional dishes the night before festivals. Markets announced no onion days, and violators were mocked publicly. A harmless smell became a social crime, showing how communities policed scent with the same intensity as they judged sin. In Victorian England, brides were forbidden from smiling in wedding portraits, not because of camera limitations, but due to strict moral judgments. A smile was considered vain, flirtatious, or spiritually careless. Women were told solemn expressions reflected purity and discipline, while happiness appeared improper. Entire generations of couples look emotionless in photographs, not from lack of joy, but from societal pressure to suppress it. Even on their wedding day, women were expected to embody restraint disguised as elegance. During the 16th century in Japan, the Ashikaga shogunate temporarily outlawed chili peppers, claiming spicy food made peasants too restless and rebellious. Soldiers patrolled markets, confiscating peppers and crushing them publicly as warnings. Traditional festival dishes were stripped of spice, leaving only bland rice cakes. Farmers who grew chilies risked fines and restaurants faced closure. A simple ingredient became a political threat, revealing how rulers once tried to control energy, emotion, and resistance through taste itself. In medieval France, commoners were forbidden from wearing metal jewelry, silver, bronze, or even polished tin, because nobles believed shiny ornaments reflected unearned status. During festivals, guards inspected earrings and hairpins, confiscating anything metallic. Offenders saw their jewelry melted in public as humiliation. Only the elite could adorn themselves with reflective surfaces, creating a society where fashion reinforced hierarchy. Clothing and accessories weren't decoration, they were visual reminders of power, inequality, and enforced social boundaries. Across the medieval Middle East, strict dining codes banned eating with the left hand, labeling it ritually impure. At large feasts and religious celebrations, observers watched guests carefully, and those who forgot could be asked to leave or shamed publicly. For travelers unfamiliar with the rule, simple mistakes became cultural violations. Mealtime wasn't just nourishment, it became a silent test of identity, purity, and respect. A single gesture could determine whether someone was welcomed or judged. In the Aztec Empire, feathered headdresses were sacred symbols of status, and specific colors like vivid Quetzal green were restricted to nobles, priests, or elite warriors. Commoners wearing forbidden feathers risked losing property or facing ritual punishment. During festivals, officials inspected dancers to verify rank through plumage. Even owning certain birds required royal permission. Clothing served as a cosmic hierarchy map, where one misplaced feather could be interpreted as defiance against both rulers and gods. Before Spain embraced the famous Tomatina festival, early 19th century towns strictly banned vegetable throwing, especially tomatoes, calling it an insult to blessed harvests. People caught tossing produce during celebrations were fined or jailed for food sacrilege. Ironically, the modern festival began when young men intentionally broke this old rule during an argument. Authorities tried to suppress the chaos for years before surrendering. What began as forbidden mischief eventually became a global cultural phenomenon rooted in rebellion. In Joseon-era Korea, hair was legally regulated, with specific lengths and styles assigned to marital and social status. Married women wore tall buns, unmarried women braided loosely, and widows displayed mourning knots. Breaking these rules at markets or festivals led to fines, public scolding, or forced restyling by officials. Hair wasn't personal expression, it was moral identity. Cutting it was considered disrespectful to ancestors, turning simple grooming into a deeply monitored symbol of lineage and virtue. In 14th century Italy, several regions enforced sumptuary shoe laws, restricting heel height for common women, claiming tall shoes made them walk above their station. Venetian chopines reaching 50 centimeters were reserved for courtesans and aristocrats, while ordinary women faced fines for even modest elevation. Inspectors measured footwear during festivals, sometimes forcing violators to remove shoes publicly. Fashion wasn't preference, it was surveillance. A few extra centimeters could define class, purity, and obedience, turning simple footwear into contested social territory. In ancient Sparta, men were forbidden to wear luxurious clothing or decorated robes. Simplicity wasn't style, it was law. During festivals like the Gymnopedia, any man wearing embroidered fabric could be publicly stripped and shamed for softness. Authorities believed ornate clothing weakened discipline. Even bright colors were discouraged. Wealthy Spartans hid fine garments to avoid punishment. The rule shaped identity. Citizens were expected to look austere, controlled, and warrior-like at all times. Appearance became ideological armor, not personal expression. In medieval Japan, Kyoto enforced a strange tofu-based rule during fire prevention festivals. Households were banned from cooking certain oily dishes because city officials believed the aroma of frying tofu increased fire risk. Patrols roamed streets sniffing for forbidden scents. If detected, families could be fined or forced to douse their hearths. Even festival food stalls faced restrictions. A simple smell became criminal evidence. Fire anxiety shaped cuisine, turning tofu, normally harmless, into a symbolic warning of disaster. In 17th century England, some Puritan towns banned bright clothing during religious festivals, claiming colorful garments invited vanity and corruption. People were forced to wear dull browns and grays, even during celebrations meant for joy. Wearing red or yellow could result in public scolding or fines. Children were corrected for ribbons, women for embroidery, and men for patterned stockings. The rule drained color from life itself, turning festivals into monochrome moral exhibitions where fashion bowed obediently to strict religious control. In ancient Maya cities, only elites could consume cacao drinks during major festivals, while commoners faced strict bans. Cacao wasn't just food, it was sacred currency linked to gods and rulers. Guards monitored gatherings to ensure ordinary citizens didn't possess cacao pots. Violators could lose property or face ritual penalties. The drink symbolized power, intelligence, and spiritual access, turning a simple beverage into a political divide. A cup of chocolate could define who belonged to divinity and who remained ordinary. In medieval Russia, a strange law punished women who braided their hair in married styles before actual marriage. Village festivals acted as surveillance zones where elders inspected hairstyles, and girls who violated the code were publicly shamed or forced to undo their braids before crowds. Hair defined purity, family honor, and readiness for adulthood. A misplaced braid could stain a girl's reputation for years. Fashion became morality, enforced through fear, tradition, and relentless community judgment. In 18th century France, aristocrats invented a bizarre powder tax rule, requiring anyone wearing perfumed hair powder during festivals to pay a fee directly to the crown. Guards collected money at event entrances, inspecting wigs and hair for white residue. The tax targeted vanity, and poorer citizens were humiliated for lacking powder. Those who refused payment could be barred from celebrations. Even hairstyle fragrance became government income, proving how appearance could be exploited as revenue disguised as etiquette. In 19th century Bengal, under British rule, a colonial law restricted locals from wearing silk turbans resembling those of high-status British officers. During religious and harvest festivals, Indian men were inspected for imitation turbans, and violators could face arrest or confiscation. Clothing became a political weapon used to suppress pride and cultural identity. A turban color or fabric choice could determine whether someone was seen as loyal or rebellious, revealing how fashion once intersected brutally with colonial power. In medieval Ireland, a peculiar banquet rule banned eating certain fish during seasonal feasts because monks claimed specific species invited sea spirits into the body. Villagers avoided eels, certain salmon, and shellfish. Officials monitored feast tables to enforce compliance. This belief turned harmless seafood into supernatural threats. Even fishermen feared selling the wrong catch near festival time. Cuisine became spiritual discipline, shaped by myth rather than taste, proving how fear could dictate entire menus for generations. In ancient Egypt, some cities banned lower-class citizens from wearing sandals made of papyrus during temple festivals because priests believed the material absorbed impure footsteps. Only nobles and temple staff could wear them, while commoners walked barefoot under scorching heat. Guards inspected footwear at entrances, forcing violators to discard their sandals publicly. Pain became ritual obedience. Even shoes were tied to purity laws, transforming temple visits into harsh reminders of hierarchy etched into the ground itself. In 16th century Ottoman markets, a bizarre festival rule banned bakers from selling oversized bread loaves because authorities believed large portions encouraged greed. Inspectors weighed loaves publicly, smashing any that exceeded the state-approved size. Offending bakers faced fines, shaming, or temporary closure. During religious festivals, citizens were warned not to display excessive bread, as abundance was seen as disrespectful to the poor. Even the size of a loaf became moral symbolism, turning everyday food into a monitored measure of humility. In ancient Korea's Goryeo dynasty, common men were forbidden from wearing wide-brimmed hats during royal processions and festivals because large hats were reserved for nobles and scholars. Guards patrolled streets measuring brims, and violators had their hats ripped apart in front of crowds. Hat width became a literal symbol of intelligence and rank. Even farmers attending celebrations risked humiliation if their hats were considered too ambitious. Fashion evolved into architecture on the head, precise, policed, and tied to social hierarchy. In 18th century Switzerland, some alpine villages banned dancing during harvest festivals after midnight, claiming late-night movements invited mountain spirits to follow dancers home. Authorities enforced curfews, and violators were fined or forced to perform public apologies. Even joyful steps became regulated fear. Travelers described entire villages freezing in silence as clocks struck 12. Movement itself became taboo, turning festivals into controlled performances shaped by superstition. A single dance step after the forbidden hour became a cultural rebellion. In medieval Persia, certain cities enforced a strange rule forbidding women from wearing patterned fabrics during major festivals, claiming geometric designs distracted men from spiritual reflection. Even tiny floral motifs were banned. Market inspectors confiscated dresses and veils deemed too engaging. Women were forced into plain cloth, regardless of wealth. Fashion that expressed creativity became a censored threat. Patterns were treated like temptation, and clothing became a battleground between individuality and rigid interpretation of moral purity. In colonial Mexico, authorities enforced a taco-related restriction during church festivals. Indigenous vendors were banned from selling spicy meat tacos near cathedral entrances because priests claimed the aroma tempted worshippers away from holiness. Guards chased food sellers from plazas, and violators lost their cooking pots. The rule created silent tension between culture and control, faith against flavor. A simple street snack became a symbol of resistance, proving how food could challenge imposed spirituality through scent alone. In 15th century Bohemia, towns imposed a bizarre winter rule, banning fur-lined clothing for unmarried women during solstice festivals because fur was seen as a symbol of dangerous attraction. Inspectors felt garments to check for hidden fur. Women caught breaking the rule were forced to wear rough wool cloaks as punishment. Clothing warmth became moral judgment. Society feared that comfort signaled seduction, turning fashion into a coded warning about purity, desire, and the fear of feminine autonomy. In Qing Dynasty China, men participating in lantern festivals were banned from wearing black boots unless they held official rank. Black boots symbolized administrative authority, and commoners imitating them were accused of stealing dignity. Patrols inspected footwear under lantern light, and violators were forced to kneel and remove their boots publicly. Even the color of leather became evidence of ambition. Footwear transformed into a political code word, marking who governed and who obeyed in a highly structured society. In ancient Mesopotamia, some New Year festivals enforced a rule requiring women to wear extremely heavy beaded veils, while men were forbidden from wearing any head coverings at all. The imbalance was intentional. Veils symbolized humility, while uncovered male heads symbolized clarity. Many women fainted from the weight, yet breaking the rule led to fines. Clothing became ritual physics. Weight for submission, exposure for authority. The festival turned fabric into ideology, where discomfort measured devotion. In medieval Scotland, villages practiced a strange oat ban during Beltane celebrations, claiming that oatcakes baked on festival day attracted forest spirits who demanded offerings. Eating oats on Beltane was punished with public ridicule or symbolic cleansing rituals. Families avoided their staple grain entirely, altering meals out of fear of unseen forces. Even agricultural identity bowed to superstition. Food, which normally grounded survival, became mystical danger, showing how belief could reshape an entire day's menu. In 17th century Thailand, certain regions enforced a rule banning gold accessories during royal boat festivals because officials claimed sunlight reflecting off jewelry could offend the river goddess. Spectators had to wear muted accessories, and vendors were forbidden from selling anything shiny near riverbanks. Guards inspected spectators for gold glints, confiscating items that sparkled too brightly. Jewelry became sacrilege. Even light itself was policed, turning a celebration of beauty into a cautious dance between devotion and fear. In ancient Greece, certain city-states enforced a shocking festival rule, forbidding women from wearing dyed clothing during religious rites for Demeter. Officials believed bright colors distracted the goddess from granting fertile harvests. Only undyed wool in dull beige or gray was allowed. Inspectors blocked temple entrances, checking fabric shades under sunlight. Women who wore even faint tints risked removal from the procession. Color itself became a spiritual threat, turning clothing into a silent negotiation between worship, fear, and agricultural survival. In 18th century Morocco, a peculiar food law banned street vendors from selling sweet pastries during major religious festivals until after sunset. Authorities insisted that eating sweets too early weakened spiritual discipline. Patrols roamed marketplaces, confiscating trays of honey cakes and punishing early buyers. Families hid pastries indoors to avoid fines. A simple dessert became a test of self-control enforced by law. Flavor transformed into virtue, and timing became sacred, revealing how even sugar could be moralized into obedience. In medieval Portugal, women attending royal festivals were forbidden from wearing necklaces longer than a certain length because long chains were believed to entangle male attention. Guards measured jewelry with metal rods, cutting off excessive lengths on the spot. Violators faced public embarrassment as their ornaments were mutilated before crowds. Necklace length became a weaponized symbol of modesty. Fashion turned into surveillance, where a few extra inches of metal determined whether a woman was considered disciplined or defiant. In ancient India's Maurya period, a strange dining rule banned citizens from eating mangoes during specific seasonal festivals unless they belonged to higher castes. Mangoes were considered gifts of the heavens and unfit for common consumption during sacred times. Inspectors checked markets for illegal mango sellers, seizing fruits and fining vendors. Families hid mangoes like contraband. A simple fruit became a caste boundary encoded in taste. Sweetness turned political, showing how food could reinforce social divisions with ritual precision. In 17th century Venice, a bizarre mask-related law forbade commoners from wearing the moretta, a popular oval mask during carnival, unless they had noble approval. Guards patrolled bridges inspecting masks, and violators had their disguises torn off. The moretta symbolized influence. Wearing it without rank was seen as social impersonation. Carnival, a celebration of anonymity, became a paradox. Identity was controlled even in disguise. Masks, meant to free people, became regulated tools of hierarchy and imitation anxiety. In ancient Persia, during the spring festival of Nowruz, men were prohibited from trimming their beards for several days because priests believed cutting hair disrupted cosmic renewal. Officials monitored grooming shops, forcing barbers to close temporarily. Those who shaved secretly risked public scolding or ritual cleansing. Facial hair became spiritual symbolism, its length marking respect for seasonal rebirth. Even a razor stroke could be seen as cosmic interference, turning grooming into an act of devotion or defiance. In 19th century Japan's Edo period, certain towns banned women from wearing bright red kimonos during cherry blossom festivals, claiming red competed with the sacred beauty of sakura. Inspectors blocked bridges leading to riversides, checking fabric colors and redirecting violators home. Dye sellers were warned against distributing red pigment before festival week. Color became competition, and fashion bowed to nature's hierarchy. Even fabric had to humble itself before flowers. Beauty wasn't free, it was managed by rules written in petals. In medieval Spain, a strange bread-related rule forbade bakers from shaping loaves into animal forms during religious festivals because clergy believed whimsical bread mocked divine creation. Bakers caught selling animal-shaped bread faced fines or had their ovens sealed temporarily. Children were discouraged from even touching such loaves. Creativity became sacrilege. Dough lost its freedom, molded only into approved shapes. Festivals that should have celebrated joy instead suffocated imagination, turning artistry into a quiet battlefield of faith and control. In 16th century Ethiopia, certain regions enforced strict festival rules, banning women from wearing beaded waist belts unless they were married. Beads symbolized maturity and responsibility, and unmarried women caught wearing them were scolded publicly or had belts confiscated. Markets were watched closely during celebrations. Waist adornments became declarations of identity, policing who was ready for adulthood. Even decoration around the body turned into a moral checkpoint, shaping how young women navigated community judgment and personal expression. In ancient Babylon, some temple festivals enforced a bizarre prohibition against drinking cold water, claiming chilled liquid weakened inner fire needed for divine communication. Priests inspected clay cups and forced people to drink only warm water, heated at communal fire pits. Vendors selling cold drinks were fined or banned temporarily. Refreshment itself became regulated spirituality. A simple temperature shift turned water into ritual alignment, showing how even the most basic human need could be reframed through myth and authority. In medieval China's Song dynasty, a bizarre festival rule forbade men from wearing green hats during Lantern Festival because green symbolized a man whose wife was unfaithful. Authorities insisted the color caused social disruption, and vendors were banned from selling green headwear for weeks. Men caught wearing one were mocked or forced to remove it publicly. A single color became a curse, turning fabric into accusation. Even during joyous festivals, humiliation hung on the shade of a hat. In 17th century Poland, certain towns banned eating roasted goose during harvest celebrations because elders believed geese carried winds of misfortune into households. Officials patrolled village squares, seizing cooked geese and replacing them with simple boiled grains. Families hiding roasted meat risked public shaming. Superstition turned a common dish into forbidden danger. Food that once symbolized abundance now represented spiritual instability, proving how fear could rewrite entire culinary traditions with a single unexamined belief. In ancient Cambodia's Angkor period, women attending royal festivals were forbidden from wearing silver bracelets unless granted permission by palace officials. Silver represented moonlight and feminine power, and rulers feared uncontrolled symbolism among the masses. Guards inspected wrists at temple entrances, cutting off illegal bracelets with metal shears. Jewelry became spiritual territory, controlled tightly by elites. A simple bracelet could be interpreted as cosmic rebellion, transforming adornment into a negotiation between status, myth, and royal anxiety. In 18th century Iceland, some villages enforced a strange rule banning the use of butter during winter solstice feasts because butter was believed to trap unwanted spirits inside homes. Families were forced to cook with smoky fish oil instead. Inspectors visited households to ensure no butter dishes were prepared. Comfort food became superstition, shaping meals through fear of the invisible. Even warmth in flavor was restricted, turning survival season cooking into a ritual of avoidance rather than celebration. In pharaonic Egypt, certain regions banned commoners from wearing anklets with bells during major temple festivals because priests believed jingling sounds disrupted sacred chants. Women caught wearing them were stopped at temple gates and ordered to remove accessories before entering. Merchants selling bell anklets faced confiscation. Sound became sacrilege. Even the smallest chime could be treated as spiritual interference. Festivals built on music paradoxically outlawed certain rhythms, showing how culture often polices its own expressions. In medieval Norway, winter festival rules forbade men from trimming their mustaches because it was believed facial hair protected the soul from frost spirits. Barbershops closed and inspectors monitored gatherings for freshly cut hair. Men who shaved risked symbolically inviting spirits into the lungs, according to folklore. Grooming became metaphysics. A simple trim transformed into cosmic vulnerability, revealing how survival myths shaped appearance. Even scissors became tools of spiritual danger rather than hygiene. In 19th century Tunisia, women attending wedding festivals were banned from wearing embroidered shoes with pointed toes because authorities believed sharp footwear cut fortune from the marriage path. Inspectors examined shoes near event entrances, redirecting women with forbidden designs. Shoemakers were warned not to craft pointed styles during wedding season. Fashion morphed into superstition, where the shape of a toe box determined destiny. Even footwear carried symbols of future joy or imagined misfortune. In ancient Japan's Nara period, children were forbidden from eating sweet rice cakes during certain temple festivals because priests believed sugar excited unruly spirits in young hearts. Parents were fined if children were caught chewing forbidden sweets near temple grounds. Vendors hid sugar-based treats until festivals ended. Innocent joy became regulated behavior. Flavor transformed into spiritual risk, shaping childhood through controlled pleasure. Even candy was seen as a threat to sacred silence. In medieval France, during Pentecost celebrations, a bizarre law forbade people from wearing cloaks with hoods up, claiming hidden faces allowed demons to walk among crowds. Guards forced festival-goers to lower hoods or remove cloaks entirely. Rain or cold offered no exceptions. Clothing became suspicion itself. Covering the head signaled danger, and exposure signaled obedience. A practical garment turned into a public test of loyalty to religious fear, reminding everyone how visibility was once weaponized. In the ancient Inca Empire, farmers were banned from eating salt during Inti Raymi, the sun festival, because priests believed salt blocked the sun's blessings on crops. Salt sellers were forced to close stalls, and households hid their supply to avoid accusations of disrespect. Meals tasted bland, but obedience was seen as spiritual nourishment. A simple mineral became cosmic interference. Food was not sustenance, but ritual alignment, proving how elemental ingredients once carried mythic weight.